The Indian economy, which had survived the great meltdown of 2007-2009, made a strong comeback thanks to its dynamic services and information technology sectors. Moreover, the public sector banks proved to be a boon to our efforts in surviving the crisis. Again, the economy took a massive hit thanks to the November 2016 Tughlaqian demonetization disaster. Still reeling under the after effects of that demonetization, the economy took a rather hard fall because of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has wrought fundamental changes in lifestyle, work culture, and a wide range of social and economic interactions in our country. This situation, this pandemic, it has presented a unique challenge. There was no tried and tested approach to resolving the issues thrown up by the pandemic. Shutting down of all economic activity resulted in loss of jobs on an unprecedented scale. There were hard choices to be made. Should the government go in for a drastic change in the current pro-poor socialist economic model or continue with it as a holding tactic? In the April-June quarter of the 2020-21 financial year, the GDP contracted by 23.9%. This was followed by smaller contractions in the subsequent quarters. Obviously, traditional methods were not capable of halting, let alone reversing the free-falling economy. There was a need for three-pronged approach. First, generate domestic demand for both consumer and capital goods. Second, provide protection to the indigenous industry from foreign competition. Third, make the indigenous industry competitive in the global markets for export purposes. Although our economy is basically dependent upon demand for its growth, exports are increasingly becoming important for our overall progress. After dithering for 4 budgets, Nirmala Sitharaman has bitten the bullet this time and discarded traditional wisdom and dumped the pro-poor template to take a right turn. She has gone for strategic disinvestment of BPCL, Air India, Pawan Hans, IDBI Bank, Container Corporation of India, and 2 as yet unidentified public sector banks. The process of identifying other public sector businesses is also on. In her budget, she has hiked the foreign direct investment limits in the insurance sector to 74% from the current 49%. Most of the PSUs will be privatized barring in 4 key strategic sectors, for example, transport, telecom, defense, atomic energy, power and coal, etc. The assets of NHAI, power grid, railways, airports, warehouses and sports stadiums too will be monetized in a planned or phased manner. To keep the banks viable by getting rid of non-performing assets, Nirmala Sitharaman announced formation of an asset management company to take over stressed assets of banks. This should resolve the perennial problem of bad loans or what we call as non-performing assets. Clearly, the government is determined to get out of as many businesses as possible while restructuring the others to make them effective and profitable. So far, annual budgets have been focusing on the supply side economics. This budget reverses the trend by paying attention to the demand side. It focuses on spending big to generate jobs, which in turn should boost domestic demand. This is the right step as it will encourage investment and production in the industrial and services sectors. The budget once again provides for major spending on roads and highways, railways, textiles, metro trains, health and water supply. 7 textile parks will be set up over 3 years. Sitharaman has announced new highway projects. She has provided 1.03 lakh crores to build 3,500 kilometers in Tamil Nadu, 65,000 crores for 1,100 kilometers in Kerala, 2,500 crores for 675 kilometers in West Bengal, and 34,000 crores for 1,300 kilometers in Assam. This is besides the point that these are the states where the state elections are approaching. But even if these steps have been taken from the point of view of elections over there, this is good for the states and this is good for the country too. To boost indigenous production under the Atmanirbhar Bharat policy, a sum of rupees 1.97 lakh crores has been envisaged over the next 5 years. Moreover, the finance minister has more than doubled the healthcare spending to rupees 2.2 lakh crores. 2.2 lakh crores. Out of this, an amount of rupees 35,000 crores has been allocated for developing COVID-19 vaccines. In an incentive to the farming community, she has announced an increase in agriculture credit target to rupees 16.5 lakh crores in the financial year 2021-22. It is alright to envisage mega investments and go in a big way for empowerment and welfare projects. But where would the funds come from? Already there are estimates of a fall in the government revenues to the tune of rupees 2 lakh crores or about 1% of the GDP. Out of this, tax revenues are expected to drop by about rupees 90,000 crores, a decline of 6% compared to last year's estimates. Within this, income tax revenue is expected to decline by 12% compared to last year's budget projections. Corporate tax revenue is projected to drop by 20% and GST collections are expected to go down by 9%. The non-tax revenue is projected to be lower by 37% compared to last year's estimates. The government's disinvestment target of rupees 1.75 lakh crores also appears to be a bit unrealistic, if not highly ambitious, given the past experiences. In 2019-20, it had estimated to fetch 65,000 crores, but could get only 50,000 crores. In 2020-21, it stepped up the target to over 2 lakh crores, but ended up with only about 35,000 crores. So how would the government meet the target of 1.7 lakh crores this year? The proposed sale of government-owned land, stadiums, airports and highways may not fetch enough funds to reach this target, especially when the government has planned to increase its expenditure by more than 4.4 lakh crores. This will increase the expenditure from the already high 13% of GDP to over 16% this year. And we are not even factoring in the expenditure on defense, which the budget has not mentioned this time. Perhaps this is the reason why the government has reduced allocations by 13% on PM Kisan scheme and by 23% on PM Gram Sadak Yojana. Similarly, there is a 12% cut in the budget for the National Education Mission. The petroleum subsidy has been cut by 68%, but are these savings in spendings enough? On the face of it, the budgeted expenditure looks impressive, but when we get into the details, we realize that a big chunk of the spending is going to be on non-productive account heads. For example, there is an increase of 28% on financing the Food Corporation of India's procurement efforts. The interest payments are estimated at more than rupees 8 lakh crores, which is 1 lakh crore more than the previous year. Disinvestments are estimated to bring 1.75 lakh crores into the government coffers, which may or may not happen. Then there is the surge in GST collections from a low of about 33,000 crores in April 2020 to more than 1.2 lakh crores in January 2021. This trend is expected to gain strength in the 2021-22 financial year. Similarly, the agriculture cess on petrol is expected to be another source of income. The direct taxes have not been touched, except that pensioners above the age of 75 years will not have to file IT returns. Of course, to incentivize the purchase of affordable house, the Finance Minister has proposed to extend the period for claiming an additional deduction for the interest of rupees 1.5 lakh paid for home loans by 1 year to March 31, 2022. So, most of the additional funds will come from disinvestments and tweaking of indirect taxes. The shortfall will be made up by stepping up borrowings and deficit financing. From current, the deficit financing will actually go higher from the current 6.8% to 9.5%, which is a bit of a gamble, but this is necessary. Education gets 6% cut in allocations. At the same time, the Finance Minister claims that apart from opening additional Sainik schools, 15,000 schools across the country will be upgraded in a manner that they become exemplars. There is also the talk of improving quality of teachers and teaching, but no roadmap has been revealed as yet. Moreover, the existing Sainik schools are not exactly in good health in terms of teachers and infrastructure. Although human resource development and education could have been given greater priority, it is good to see the government going in for a transformative budget by concentrating on health and well-being, physical and financial capital and infrastructure, inclusive development or aspirational India, innovation and R&D, and minimum government and maximum governance. It is this budget which gives the nation some hope in its pushback against the pandemic-driven economic crisis. But let us not forget that the best of intentions needs a conducive environment to fructify. The social unrest must be addressed. Divisive politics needs to be shed forever. And finally, federalism should be reinstated by reigniting the trust between the center and the states. It is not difficult for the Modi government, given its current strength and political capital. If they want, they can really get rid of all this divisive politics, and they can also regain the confidence of the states and make sure that no further social conflict happens by listening to the people. Even the current crisis created by the farmers' agitation can be resolved given the political will on the part of Modi's regime. Thanks for being with me. I shall come back with another episode soon. Bye-bye.